Hey, nature lover. Hey, Millie. Hey, Linda. I hope you guys are having a good morning. It's good to see you.
She didn't stay, things got tough. I told a lie, she got mad. She wasn't there when things got bad. I never ever saw the northern lights. Never really heard a cluster of flies. Never ever saw the stars so bright. And in the farmhouse, it'd be alright, 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 alright. Woke this morning to a stinging lash. Every man has found the lash. Each betrayal begins with trust. Every man returns to dust. Don't ever saw the northern lights. Never really heard a cluster of flies. Never ever saw the stars so bright. In the farmhouse, it'd be alright, 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 alright.
Summer Moon Utah Wells has been missing for over 2 years now. She was reported missing June 15th, 2021 around 6:30 p.m. She was reportedly last seen wearing a pink shirt and gray pants and was believed to be barefoot. It was said that she was last seen by one of her brothers walking away from her home. It was also said that she was last seen in the early afternoon of June 15th, 2021. But it also is said that she was last seen around 6 p.m. And I think that's because that's what her mother says. So 2 years later, and there's still no answers that we know of for little Summer. And there's a lot of rumors and speculations going around right now because, well, there always is. But because of Ziggy talking to Fred Hill. And I think a lot of people probably take it with a grain of salt, but a lot of people really take it and run with it, what Fred says. You can't take Fred's word for gold just because he's from the holler. All right, so Fred Hill is currently incarcerated at the Hawkins County Jail. So Ziggy decided to hook him up with some commissary and video visits. See, this benefits Ziggy and it also benefits Fred. So just keep that in mind throughout this. And that's not a jab at anybody. I'm just pointing it out because, well, it is what it is. And because I believe the information should be taken in, with a grain of salt. Just like with paid interviews, always be skeptical of what you hear. You never know what someone is saying because it's an asset to them. It's an asset to both Ziggy and Fred for them to just have something to say about Summer's case, and for Fred to come up with something to say at all to Ziggy, something that might raise some eyebrows or make her want to come back for more. I would rather hear what someone actually wants people to hear because they think it's important, or it's actually how they really feel and it's coming from their heart. Not just because they're getting paid to say it. It's a whole different motivation and intention. So like I said, just keep that in mind. And that's just my honest opinion. And I'm not saying that I know for sure that that's why Fred is talking. It's just, Ziggy's like his sugar mama right now. So of course he's going to keep talking to her. Like when Heels paid Allie and her family to speak when they were all standing outside and their hoodies and everything, and JLR and Molly Golightly and everybody was there talking to them, talking to Sherry, Grand Bun, Allie, all of them. It was hard to believe anything that they said when we saw Allie be handed a wad of cash. Same with Dudley. And that's just my opinion. You can make up your own mind on how you feel, but I kind of feel the same way about this interview with Fred as I did about the interviews that Heels did with Allie and her family and that they did with Dudley, because they were all paid and they were all getting something out of it. If you go over to Ziggy's channel, you can hear this interview with Fred for yourself. Interview, conversation, whatever you want to call it. The first 40-minute conversation is titled Video Visit with Fred Hill, 6/22/23, no commentary. And the 15-minute long visit is titled Call Received from Fred Hill in Jail, 6/23/23. Very hard to understand. Help me decipher. And it is pretty hard to understand. So I would hope that by now the law has already looked into all of this and that Fred has already said these things to the law himself, so they already knew before Ziggy put it out, unless he's just making things up for the camera because he knows that is what is going to keep Ziggy coming back and helping him out. Because like I said, she's like a sugar mama right now, and I assume that Fred is just speculating, but if he actually has credible information, it might have been better off for law enforcement to decide what happens with that information for themselves. But I think if Fred already talked to the law and they thought there was any substance to what he was saying, they would have told him not to talk about it, probably, and maybe they did. I don't know. And I don't know what all Fred told law enforcement either. There's some things that he told Ziggy he couldn't talk about that he told them, but he did talk about everything else. So it seems that they didn't tell him not to talk about that. It could potentially be damaging to Summer's case, though, for Ziggy to have uploaded this to her YouTube, like right away, if there's a reason why law enforcement didn't want that information out, but it's too late now if that's the case. It's already out there. Everybody's already listened to it. If Fred just told them about this and it happens to be credible and the law doesn't want the information out there for thousands of people, it's too late. So I don't think there was anything of importance found through this tip from Fred, or we would have heard about it by now, I think. It doesn't mean I'm right. I have no idea what the law knows. I just doubt they found Summer. I very highly doubt it. There's still an active Amber Alert for Summer. There is a slim chance that what Fred is saying could be true. And if that's the case, well, it wouldn't be out of the norm for someone to be hanging around in the woods at Laurel Run Falls, at the Laurel Park, or near Bays Mountain, or anywhere in that general area of where Cotton allegedly told Fred that Summer was before he passed away in February, that Summer is inside of a cave underwater. Someone could easily be inconspicuous enough if they wanted to be, if they were determined enough to be, to move Summer if she really was there, and there's a chance nobody would even know. If Summer is hidden in a cave underwater, that implies that she is no longer alive. Now, that's a very scary thought, but wouldn't she likely have washed away in the water and be somewhere else by now? And I'm sorry, maybe I should have put a trigger warning on this before I said that. I'm really sorry. but I will go ahead and throw one out now. But yeah, that's why I wouldn't put something like this out on YouTube, because, not right away at least. It's just not worth the risk of someone possibly moving Summer or people going there to see for themselves or whatever and contaminating the scene if there is one. A lot of people think Fred is just trolling Ziggy or just trying to keep her talking to him because she's putting money on his books and stuff. She was probably buying things for him and Laura and providing them with money before Fred went to jail as well, since she first went down there probably. I believe she provided Laura and Fred with cell phones and her cell phone service at one point, and she's still helping them with things now. There's nothing wrong with helping people, but I think that's important to note because that gives him and her too, because it's helping Ziggy's channel and helping her out financially too. So it gives them both motivation to come up with something to say rather than actually having something to say genuinely. And I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying keep that in mind. And those are two very different things. And we can't just ignore that. And that's no hate on Ziggy or Fred. And maybe he is saying the same thing he would say if she didn't pay him at all. I don't know. But Ziggy is, she's his sugar mama. And I think he really wants her to stick around. He seems, he loves her. He tells her he loves her. So, and I think she wants Fred to tell her more so she can put it out on her channel too, So there's a certain hype to it. And I don't really like the hype to it. Like, oh, I talked to Fred Hill. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, what's Fred saying? And like, it's just this hype. And it's like, whoa, hold on. He's kind of getting paid to say this. She kind of is too, for him to say it on her channel. And that's where you kind of got to back up a little bit. It's like, this is kind of more for entertainment purposes. This isn't really for helping the case or helping to find Summer. So don't get the two confused. That's my opinion. And I mean, no offense by that at all. Like I said, this is not a hate stream. I'm not hating on anybody. Just saying it is what it is. So it's possible that Fred could just be blowing smoke up Ziggy's ass for views on YouTube. So she keeps coming around and helping him out, because it's a win-win for both of them. But Fred could just be saying what he actually thinks too. And maybe Ziggy really does care about Fred and thinks he's a great person and really just wants to help him out. I don't know. Or hell, maybe it's all true. Although I am very skeptical of that or anything Fred says, and I always have been. Nothing personal. I just think he says a lot of things like fact that are opinion are just not true. I'm not hating on Fred. Ziggy knows that Fred says things that are not true. Like a lot of things. I mean, I would assume she knows that. But when the holler speaks, I listen regardless. Even if he isn't even if he is not in the holler now, he's from there. And he was there when Summer went missing, leading up to and after. So yeah, I listen just in case. Also, I believe it could be valuable to know the character and habits of all the people that surrounded Summer on and around the day she was reported missing. I mean, Fred lived there for Summer's entire life, so Don went to Fred's, I'm pretty sure, didn't he? Because that was after they came back from Virginia, I thought. Because he got in trouble. I don't know, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure he's been there her whole life. Don went to Fred's that night after Summer was reported missing, too. Why? Fred says he thinks they were trying to frame him. I don't know. Could be. Or Don could have been getting something off of Fred, or he could have been trying to plant ideas in people's minds right from the start. Or maybe Don really doesn't know where Summer is, and maybe she really was abducted, and Don was so beside himself that he couldn't just sit at home, so he sought out a friend to talk to, and that just so happened to be Fred. I don't know. I doubt it. He probably went there to get drugs, or maybe he really was trying to frame him. Who knows? If nothing else, it's interesting to hear, in my opinion, as long as I have been following this case day in and day out, because Fred was not far from Summer. So I just want to hear what he has to say. He was only a couple minutes drive and about an approximate 10-minute walk. So about as far from Summer's home as the sex offender that Candace so casually refers to as being within 8 minutes walking distance from their house. 8 minutes walking distance for who? For Candace? How does she know that? Were people off the internet putting ideas in Candace's head and that's where she got that from? Because I hope so. Because Candace says she didn't even know they lived there, but knows it's an 8-minute walk. So either someone told her that, she researched it herself, which I doubt, or she knows because she walked it herself. Anyways, my point being, Fred lived pretty close to Summer, not right next door, but right up the road, 10-minute walk. So the law, I'm sure, looked into all of this about Cotton Simpson and Laurel Falls and whatever else Fred said to them that he couldn't tell Ziggy, or whatever else Fred was told that he thought was credible and told the law. Maybe right now, and probably more than likely, Summer is not at Laurel Run Falls, and he's 100% wrong. But we should be very careful with how we present this information because some people really take it and run with it. And I didn't want to talk about it right away because what if the law really didn't know about this yet and it really was true? Like, what if, and it seems so unlikely, but that would just be terrifying if it were true and everybody was just talking about it right off the bat before the law even got a chance to go check it out. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay out of it for a few days and then talk about it. So I think if law enforcement thought Summer was there, they would have it all closed off and like be searching there. That's just the logical part of my brain thinking. And maybe they did close it off and search there and nobody knew, but I feel like if they did, locals would know and it would have blew up on YouTube by now. Just my opinion. And I think they, being Ellie, would have jumped on it right away if they thought there was any substance to these claims. And they probably checked it out, even if they didn't think it was credible just because it was said. And they know they were going to have to check it out before the whole internet went there to see for themselves, just in case. I don't think it means anything in regards to Summer's case that Fred got his visits privilege taken away with Ziggy. And now Ziggy's saying the jail has blocked all contact with her and Fred. So yeah, Ziggy just got blocked from the jail. But I don't think that means there's been a break in Summer's case. And Hawkins County doesn't want Fred spilling any more beans, so they cut him off. I think he's just not allowed to be on YouTube. And I think it just means that they likely don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of having that much more rumor and speculation to deal with in Summer's case. So they're probably cutting him off from being on YouTube in jail for that reason too. Which is what Ziggy says is the reason, because inmates aren't allowed on YouTube. But, like they really want to have to deal with that. The TBI states that if they discover information which could lead them to finding Summer, they would share that with the public. But maybe by now they've changed their minds on that with all the crazy things going around YouTube. Nobody could have ever imagined Summer's case would blow up like this on YouTube, with all the rumors and speculation that went wild and caused hundreds of tips to be called in. It was probably overwhelming for investigators in the very beginning. And I'm not talking crap about anybody, but I think a lot of it probably had to do with Jody Sue, and a lot of it probably had to do with trafficking and rumors surrounding that, and people thinking they knew what happened. And I'm sure there's all kinds of things that I probably wouldn't even think of that were called in. I mean, the things people email me or even leave on comments on my page about what they allegedly know. They know what happened to Summer and they'll tell me all about it. And it's out there. I mean, it's really out there. And I'm never mean to these people. I feel like maybe a little bit bad for them, honestly. But it's just crazy. Like, I can't imagine what the police have had people say to them. Like, or even like bigger creators on here. Like, I'm sure you guys have got some wild emails. I have, and I'm like a tiny brand new creator, and I've got some wild ones. It was probably pretty overwhelming for investigators in the very beginning, I'm sure. And the law in Summer's case is very tight-lipped, as we all know, to protect the integrity of the investigation. And they even say they cannot release specifics about the timeline due to the integrity of the investigation, which is weird to me because you'd think they would want the timeline to be known to the public, right? I mean, you would think they would want that to be known. There's a lot of things I would think if they had that they would want the public to know in helping to find Summer, unless, of course, they think that her parents are possibly prime suspects. That would make sense why they're not saying anything. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that would make sense. Yeah. They're so tight-lipped to the point where they don't even find it best to publicly clear anybody, which would likely calm down a lot of the rumors, honestly. But knowing how a lot of people on here are, it could potentially lead to more. I just think they would still have an Amber Alert up if they really found Summer. Like Fred says, he thinks they found her. They would have taken her Amber Alert down. I mean, really. And I think by now we would know if there was any validity to the claim of Summer being in a cave, underwater, in some specific area, over a cliff. Like, I know it sounds pretty out there, hard to get to. It would have been hard to get her there in the first place. But they would have figured out a way to check it by now. I hope, at least. I mean, my God. Fred says he thinks they might have found Summer based on the way they were reacting and replying to him, but I just don't think so. 423 Chase said Summer was in Indiana. I mean, come on. It's not the first time we've heard someone say they knew where Summer was, and it turned out to be wrong. Ziggy has this 40-minute phone call with Fred where he tells her he loves her at the end twice, and Ziggy says that's not the first time he's said that. This is pretty much word for word what was said, with some of my commentary, of course. And like I said, this is not a hate stream. This isn't like, I'm not trying to like hate on Fred or hate on Ziggy or whatever. It's just, it is what it is. Just stay, what's the word? Just stick with the facts and what's being said, and give your opinion if you want. Just don't be nasty, please. So this is pretty much word for word what was said. I'm going to put a trigger warning out there for this, and for anyone that's sensitive to talk of drugs, there probably be some foul language, violent talk, talk of, unaliving people's selves too. So please use earbuds if you're in public, or especially if you're around children. And also, trigger warning, if you're not in a good mental and emotional state right now, please just don't listen to this. Don't listen to anything on my page if you're not in a good mental or emotional state right now. There's talk of a missing child, Summer Wells, as if she is no longer with us. And that can be very heavy for some people. And I probably should have said this in the very beginning, and I truly apologize for that. So the 40-minute visit, Fred and Ziggy connect on the old video call system through Hawkins County Jail, and Fred's face shows on the jail screen in his orange scrubs with his bowl-cut hair. He no longer has his long hair. Ziggy says she is trying to get a hold of Laura. She says she hasn't talked to her for a couple days. She knows she's having some type of issues with Fred's sisters. Fred says, well, she shouldn't be. Sounds like they don't have a very good relationship. Fred and his sisters, or Laura and his sisters, or Fred and Laura, really, for that matter. Ziggy says your sister kicked her out of your mom's. Fred says she can go to the camper. He says it just sounds like an excuse to leave, and that she did this the last time. From what it sounds like, Laura doesn't want to be with Fred, or he really doesn't even speak very highly of her. And it's none of my business, but if I was Fred, I would just let her go. If someone doesn't want to be with you and they want to get away, there's a reason for that. Laura wants to be out of the holler, according to Fred, so maybe she wants better for herself than whatever she has there. There's nothing wrong with that. Fred says they had him on suicide watch at the jail because of something that happened the other night. He says something along the lines of there were other inmates in his cell or another inmate, and they were trying to move some dope or do some dope, and for whatever reason they jumped Fred, and he says they about did him in. He later, in the same conversation, tells Ziggy that he was asleep during an attack in which his cellmate choked him and took advantage of Fred having a sheet around his neck, trying to stay cool because it was so hot in there. So I was a little confused on that. Was it just the one person that attacked him the one time, or was there something going down prior to the attack that caused someone to get heated and take it overboard by choking Fred out to the point where he had to be brought back to life? Like, did that all just happen in one setting? Because he kind of makes it sound like something happened prior to him being choked out. These people were in there trying to move dope or do dope or something, and then something must have happened where this dude got upset, and then later that night it was all hot and everybody was cranky, and Fred was sitting there with this sheet around his neck, and this dude just snapped and started choking him out, I guess. I don't know. So anyways, Fred says he had to be brought back to life, and I think he's telling the truth because, well, I mean, I don't really see why somebody would lie about that, but I don't see why people would lie about a lot of things. And this is where he said he got brought back at. Can you see that very well? It's kind of gross, honestly. Right there. That's where they had to zap him and bring him back. Ew. Yeah. So he says, that's where they brought me back. Ziggy says, wow, you actually died? And he says, yes. He says he is separated from these people now, and he's in a different pod. He said it's not protective custody. So Fred being in the hole probably isn't related to that incident, but I don't even think he's in the hole. I think that might have just been a rumor because now Ziggy's saying he's not in the hole, he's not in any kind of trouble, and everything's fine. It's just that she's blocked from the jail. Whatever. I don't know. It sounds like they just moved him to a different pod. So I'm sure the other guy was reprimanded, I would imagine. Ziggy asks if Fred has a tablet, and if not, how can she get him one? He says he doesn't know. It sounds expensive, in my opinion. It's like $104 a day to sit in the jail around where I'm from. From what I hear, it's, $104 a day to sit in county in blue. So maybe he's sitting there in orange and it's not costing him so much because he's going to be on some kind of bond to get out of going to prison. But when you sit there on a misdemeanor, they charge you every day. I don't know how it works there, but jail things are ridiculously priced. That's my point. Jail is really expensive. And I guarantee you that shit is not cheap, those tablets. They talk about there should be money on his books. There should be $40, but there's only $20 on there from someone else that wasn't Ziggy, but it was Deanna Warner, who Fred says he used to date like 20 years ago, but now he's been with Laura for like 20 years. But the money didn't come from Ziggy or Kathy, who is the person who Ziggy said also put $20 on Fred's books. So he should have $60 on there, but there's only $20. And I don't know about all that, but honestly, it kind of sounds sketchy if I'm being 100. It's kind of a bad look to talk about paying him and to be so concerned about the money and how much he has right now and all the things he has and needs, like material things like the tablet and all that and the phone, while you're there for a visit to talk about summer for your YouTube channel. And I'm not hating, I'm just saying, I just think it's a bad look. And that's, a lot of people are going to say something about that. And I don't know if that was on purpose or not. But I think letting Fred speak without talking about money first, or kind of reminding him about money and the material things you'll be providing him with if he keeps talking to you, would be a good idea, because then he isn't motivated to tell you what you want to hear so much. He will rather say what he actually wants to say. And I guess it's not a big deal. It is actually a big deal to some people, you know. It's just that I want to hear an honest conversation, not just some hype from something someone is just speculating because they're getting something out of it. You know what I mean? Ziggy, don't hate me for that. Like, I'm just saying how I feel. People listen so closely because Fred lived right by Summer prior to Summer going missing, and for her whole life, as far as I know. But somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, because I can't remember what year he came to and from Virginia when he was there. And although it may be interesting to some, I don't care to hear things that are just being said for hype, for someone to get money and material things and whatever else Fred is hoping to get from Ziggy. So I hope that's not what it is, but it kind of seems like it. Ziggy said someone came down to the jail to put money on his phone so he can call people. He says, well, I've been trying to call out, but it won't let me. Maybe he needs to add funds to his account or something, and maybe he was trying to hint at that. I don't know. If he is indigent in there, then I would think they would take money off his books if somebody put money on there for whatever he used that he owed for. I don't know how they do it there, though. Fred says there's a phone he can take into his cell. It's something through the church and the jail, so I guess it's like a cell phone that you can have in jail. That's actually surprising. They would let the inmates have their own cell phones in jail, but that probably helps people out with their attorneys and their bonds and everything too, which probably helps the courts and the jail move people in and out quicker and could possibly be making them money in a way, even though it's through the church that they get the phones. He says he could be able to text her and talk to her on that phone. I think he was hinting to Ziggy to pay for minutes for him so he could use that phone so they could text and stuff. And maybe he's thinking he could get a hold of Laura that way too. And he's probably trying to find a way to get that cash so he can bond out. He wants that $1,000 so he can get out of there, because that's all he needs is $1,000 in cash. Fred says there's a chance the jail took the extra $40 for medical expenses, but I don't know if it works that way. It seems like they're spending an awful lot of time talking about money and these types of things. But that would probably be tacked onto his fines, which are not taken out of commissary that I've ever heard of, but I'm certainly no expert on that. If you're indigent, like I said, which means you're broke basically, and you need to use their supplies, but you don't have money for it, so you'll pay it back later, then you owe on something. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe he went in as indigent and he owed, so when they put money on his books, they took it for everything that he's used so far. I don't know. Fred says Sundays they're on lockdown most of the day. That sucks. Can you imagine sitting in a county jail on lockdown all day, every Sunday, just because it's Sunday? That would suck. And I mean no offense by that to anybody that observes Sunday for religious purposes. I'm just saying that would suck. Moral of the story, don't go to jail. Ziggy says she's sure Fred is bored in there, so she was wanting to hook him up with lots of visits and phone calls. Ziggy, you know you wanted them views, girl. You can't even lie about that. Not all people care about views that much, but Ziggy has got her whole thing going on over there. She's clearly trying pretty hard to make some money for herself. So she's going to run things a little different in a type of way than people that are here for the passion of it. Does that make sense? She's going to run hers a little bit different because she's doing it for money. And she's made that pretty obvious and pretty clear. So of course there's going to be a certain hype to it because she's doing it to make money. So it's more for no matter how you look at it, this is really just for entertainment purposes. Really, at the end of the day, that's all this can really be said that it's for. So I'm not saying Ziggy has no passion, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it shows that she's really trying to get views and make some money off this, which is fine. You do you, girl, but it makes it harder for me to take this all seriously and for any of it to be believable. I feel silly to think any of this is true, just based on that alone, actually. Ziggy says she knows Fred wanted to talk to her because she knew Fred hadn't gotten to talk to Laura yet. And if you don't know who Laura is, she's Fred's girlfriend of like 20 years. I think I said that. Who Fred does not seem to be very pleased with at the present time, which honestly sucks because relationship problems just suck. Fred says Laura has probably went back to Virginia by now. So if you don't know, you probably already know, but Virginia is where Fred got some weapons charges in 2011 prior to the shooting of Roy Fanning, which was only a few weeks after Summer was born on February 24th of 2016. The man that Fred shot was alleged to have basically had it coming that Roy Fanning, the guy that got shot, he started it. And Fred must have been put in a position where he was doing what he had to do, from what it sounds like, to protect himself, I suppose. And that was in Hawkins County. So if you wanted to look it up on, you can. It's said in the news that Roy Lee Fanning initiated the whole thing when he got shot and that he was arrested after the incident. Hawkins County Sheriff's Office Detective Ken Sturgill said that Roy Lee Fanning, 44 of Bank Drive, Fall Branch, initiated the entire event that led to him being shot in the neck shortly after midnight on February 24th by Fred Jr. Hill, according to this news site, the Johnson City Press. And just a reminder, this is what Fred used to look like. He looks a lot different with his hair different. And then this is, that's Roy Lee Fanning, the guy that he shot. And if this is the same picture, you can, it's not. Well, there's another picture somewhere where you can like actually see his neck where he got shot. It's pretty gnarly. So, Ziggy said last time I talked to her, no, about Laura being in Virginia. Ziggy's saying, no, she's still in Tennessee. Ziggy said, I shipped dog food out there. Fred says, well, it'll be what it'll be about Laura. He says his court date is not until the 31st of August for his arraignment. That's rough to have to sit in jail for that long without even seeing a judge. And I'm not sympathizing with Fred. I'm not hating on him, but he screwed up and he has to pay the consequences, right? And he knows that. And he even says that actually to Ziggy, but that sucks not to even see a judge for that long. That's pretty bad. You should at least be given some paperwork by now. You can't just lock people up and not tell them anything for months. I mean, I guess they can because they are. Fred says, with the $2,500, he could get out today. He said it was $5,000, but the bondsman said they would work with him on the $2,500. So Fred's getting it down to that point where potentially YouTube could really help him out and get his ass out of there, which makes me believe anything that he says, that much less, because it feels like he really just wants to have something to tell Ziggy to keep her around so he can try to get some cash and get out of there and get whatever else he can while he's there too. I mean, hate me if you want for thinking that way, but I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. And I could be looking at it all wrong. I'm just thinking out loud here. Don't take me wrong. I'm not being nasty. I'm really not. I'm not trying to be negative or talk down on anybody. It is what it is. And I think Ziggy is that segue to Fred's freedom right now in his mind, because all he has to do is sit there all day and think. And he's a hustler and he's a drug dealer. I mean, that's That's how he thinks. He's a hustler. He's constantly thinking of a way to get out and get something for himself. And that's just how people like that think for the most part, most of the time, in my experience and from what I've observed. So I feel like Ziggy or Fred's thinking, okay, Ziggy's basically my ticket out of here because she's my bridge to other people on YouTube that could potentially get me cash to get me out of here. See what I'm saying? So he's like, definitely got to think of something to tell her, right? But I mean, like I said, I could be looking at it all wrong too. But I don't know. I feel like when you look at it for what it is, when I hear Fred say he really just wants Summer to be found and he thinks they may have found her, I just wonder what his intentions are and how much he really does care. And it almost kind of makes me a little bit mad to hear him say that, because it's like, do you really care that much? Like, do you really want her to be found? Because you're sitting here saying, like, you're pretty sure they found her. Really, though? Or are you just telling people that because you're trying to get something out of it? Because then if that's what you're doing, it makes me feel like you really don't care as much as you say you do. And I feel bad saying that if he really truly has a good heart and wants Summer found genuinely, like if he really genuinely cares, but I can't ever know that. And it doesn't seem like he was taking it very seriously when he talked to Ziggy before. I know the monkeys were real in Beech Creek. Yes, there was really monkeys. It was in the news and everything. But a lot of the shit he said, like about Rosemary Bly, who's been missing since 2009 from St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, and she has children out there who don't know where their mother is. And he said things about her being around after the date that she was missing, doing, illegal things. We'll just leave it at that. And it wasn't true. That's not true. And how dare he say something like that about Rose? He doesn't know her. There's no way he knows Rose. I don't believe it. Fred says he could get the money, but he can't get to it from jail. But he's got it, though. Ziggy asks, is it just a selling charge or was it manufacturing? He says it's maintaining a dwelling and selling. I could have sworn when I saw a post with a screenshot of Fred's mugshot and charges listed, one of them was manufacturing. I swear I saw that, but my eyes deceive me sometimes. Fred says he hasn't gotten any paperwork yet. Ziggy says she knows the 2 dates he allegedly sold on, which was November 27th of 2021, 5 months after Summer went missing. Not that it has any relevance, but Fred was probably selling and maintaining a dwelling for at the time of Summer's disappearance, too. It was pretty close to that time. And the second date was March 3rd of 2022. Fred says, okay, I know exactly who that was. I don't know why. Maybe I'm too skeptical. Sometimes, but I totally rolled my eyes at that. Like, yeah, right. You might have a good idea of who it could have been, but there's no way he knew exactly who that was, as if it was like the only time it's ever happened or something, or the only person he ever sold to. I doubt it. Ziggy says, who? I'm just curious. Fred says, they call him Big Mountain. He's actually from across Clench Mountain. He was introduced to me and didn't come back. So someone brought this dude up to get some junk off Fred, probably some hard drugs, and they wired up on him and never came back, allegedly. He just didn't realize at the time, obviously, that the dude was wearing a wire. Fred says he pretty much knows who they are. Now, he doesn't sound so sure just seconds later. You either know exactly or you're not sure. Fred says while the Summer Wells case was going on, people didn't want to fuck with him at all. And I imagine that they probably didn't. And I don't blame them. Something as tragic as Summer going missing when she was only 5 years old and under such suspicious circumstances involving her own parents, that should be a reality check for anybody in that Beech Creek community. Anybody in Hawkins County, or all of Northeast Tennessee for that matter. It was a reality check for me, for people in a lot of places far away from there, but the deepest impact I would imagine will lie within the community Summer disappeared from. Ziggy says, do you think that person was in trouble? That's why they did it? Fred says, yeah, probably snitching their way out, which usually is how people get caught because somebody snitched on them because they got hemmed up themselves and got caught with something on them. So they decided to turn in their dealer so they don't get in so much trouble. Then their dealer goes away for a while unless they do the same thing. People die that way. I'm just saying. Ziggy says at first she thought he had manufacturing, which so did I. So Ziggy thought, oh, great. But she thinks now with this, and then Fred interrupts her and says, I think there are people in here telling me where I was choked out in the cell and stuff. If there was people outside to push it where they broke the pins loose in my wrist and about broke my arm and stuff were working on me and that place on my chest, that was my ticket out of here. That they'd have to release me if I had somebody to push it from the outside. So I think what he's saying here is he had to have somebody, he was trying to make a really big deal about all this that happened at the jail with the COs pulling him out and they messed up his arm and wrist and everything. And after that fight happened, and then they're just trying to say that he was just trying to off himself, that it wasn't really, nothing really happened to him, that he did it to himself. So I'll read it one more time. He says, I think there are people in here telling me where I was choked out in the cell and stuff. If there was people outside to push it where they broke the pins loose in my wrist and about broke my arm and stuff were working on me, and that place on my chest, that was my ticket out of here. That they'd have to release me if I had somebody to push it from the outside. So, Ziggy says, oh yeah, because of medical stuff. Fred says, well, because of the lawsuit. Ziggy says, well, I'm afraid because I don't want them to drop our visit. She wants to hear what happened, though. Fred says they won't. Fred says they take pictures every so many minutes to keep the inmates safe. I'm sure they do, but I don't understand why he says that. Fred says there's lawsuits like crazy on Hawkins County right now because of people getting killed and stuff in there. And there's been a couple deaths at the Hawkins County Jail in the past few years, but one of them that I read about, Ronnie Lawson says the dude died of natural causes, and that was in 2019. Another one had trigger warning, hung himself in July of 2020. In January of 2021, there was a death there, and Lawson said that man who was in his 50s died of ongoing health problems. And I'm not sure about any others, but these people aren't getting killed. They're ending their own lives or dying of natural causes or ongoing health issues, according to the sheriff. There could also be killings that have happened there in the recent years that I just don't know about, too. Ziggy says if something happened to Fred in jail, she would be super suspicious because everyone is passing away and getting arrested that is tied to the Summer Wells case. I don't know why it bothers me when people say the Summer Wells case. Like it's Summer's case. Why does that bother me? That's so picky of me, but it just makes it feels like the Summer Wells case. Like it's some hype, and I don't like that. Like it's Summer's case. It's not the Summer Wells case. Like it's a TV show or something. I don't like it. Fred says, see, I choked out, but the COs were the ones that broke the pins loose in my wrist and broke my other arm back loose. Fred says he wasn't trying to go to medical because they would just try to say he was trying to hurt himself to avoid a lawsuit. I wonder if Hawkins County is actually that cheap and that corrupt. Or is Fred just not in favor of them or the jail? Or maybe he just has some wrong information, who knows? Ziggy asks if he has a lawyer, and he says no. No, I don't, but I'm going to have to get one probably. Ziggy says, and you can't ask for one till you get to court for a public defender. That's unfair, though. Regardless whether Fred's a criminal or not, he has the right to legal counsel just like anyone else, and he shouldn't have to sit there for that long without even knowing what's going on. Ziggy asks how often he gets commissary, and he says twice a week. Ziggy says she will do what she can to help him out. Ziggy says, I think you're a really good person, and I don't think this makes you a bad person at all. Fred says, hopefully the Summer Wells case, I wish he would just say Summer's case. I don't know why that bothers me. He says, I hope the Summer Wells case will be getting ready to be solved. Ziggy wants to know if Fred's case has anything to do with Summer, which I don't see why it would. If it was drug charges, that pretty much speaks for itself, in my opinion. Fred's like, no, my case doesn't have anything to do with Summer. Ziggy says, it was just really weird timing. I think the timing makes sense. Fred says, well, when they started the investigation like that, in 10 years, they closed it and reopened it. And when they closed her case and reopened it again, it reopened my case. Fred says, when 2 years was up on Summer, they had to close it and reopen it. Okay, where I said 10, I totally meant to say 2, by the way. Fred says when they dropped Summers to reopen his and start fresh, to reopen her case and start fresh, it made his case pop up. He's saying Summers' case, after it was open for 2 years, they had to close it and reopen it fresh. Okay, so it made his case pop up, and that's why they grabbed his and dropped off the shift real quick. I don't think he says shift, but I cannot tell what word he is saying there. Then he says that's why mine come into play, but I ain't got nothing to do with the Summer Wells. I don't think Jody knows. She might have her suspicions, but Ziggy says, I don't think for a second that you're involved in the Summer Wells case. I think Andy Bernard has involvement. Fred says, well, he's probably got something involved, but another person I believed was involved, which I discussed with some of the bigger dudes, and they're supposed to be checking a certain area out, and they more than likely found her. I think Fred means Ellie by some of the bigger dudes, like the investigators. And I don't think they found her. Like I said, her Amber Alert is still up. Ziggy says, who? Marlena Crawford? Ziggy has a very big interest in Marlena Crawford. She is a little bit of a mystery, I suppose. Earl Taylor? Fred says, no, he already passed away. It was Cotton Simpson. He fell off a cliff on the backside of Laurel Run Park, trying to go into a cave. Fred says he just found this out himself, and he mentioned a bunch of stuff to him that he didn't take seriously at first, but that's probably where she is. He says there's a hidden compartment behind a waterfall, and that's where they're trying to say Summer's body is. Ziggy asks if it's Sensabaugh Tunnel. Fred says that's where they're trying to say her body is, but I don't know if he heard what Ziggy said about Sensabaugh Tunnel, because he said she was in a cave over a cliff and underwater. Is there an underwater cave over a cliff at the Sensabaugh Tunnel? Or is it just in the same area? Because it's like a 20-minute drive from Laurel Falls Park to Sensabaugh Tunnel. So they're really like not that close to each other. Ziggy asks if police have questioned him since he's been in jail. He says they have. They mean about Summer, I'm assuming. He says yesterday they questioned him. Ziggy asks if they were nice to him. Fred says they questioned him to death about the reward money, and he told them he didn't want nothing to do with it. Why would they be questioning Fred Hill so hard about reward money? Why? What? Why? Why Fred Hill? Did he have anything to do with it? Why would they think he did? What's going on with that? Fred says he just wants Summer to be found. Okay. He says he ain't got nothing to do with it because he is 100% cleared. Was he worried he did until he was cleared? He just words things funny sometimes, I guess. Fred says they're not giving him a hard time at all, and that the law knows he has nothing to do with Summer missing. Fred reiterates that as far as Summer's case, he's 100% cleared because he ain't got nothing to do with it, and he's not worried about being charged for anything on Summer's case. Ziggy asks, how can we get you in contact with Laura? Fred says she can come to the jail and get in contact with me if she wants to. She can get in contact with me in so many ways, it's not even funny. She can come to the jail and have visitation here at the jail. Ziggy asks if you have to have a valid ID, and he says no, but I would imagine that you do. That's how it works most places, I'm sure, but I guess it could be different there. They talk about how many video visits you can get, and Fred says he was told you can have one every day. Someone just has to pay for it. Fred says Laura can go get an ID for next to nothing, and she has the money to do it. Maybe she don't want to talk to Fred. Ziggy asks if Laura has a way to drive there, and Fred says yeah, she's got 2 or 3 vehicles to use. Ziggy says, what was it that your mom passed away from? Geez, Ziggy. Fred says something was so high in her blood. Ziggy says, is it true that it was something to do with blunt force trauma? Because people started a rumor trying to accuse Laura of something. Fred says they had a camera set up over top of Mom for like 6 months so they could see anyone that was in and out with her. Ziggy said the rumor is the video was shut off for a few hours and turned back on, and Laura was there. Fred says Laura was never there. Just I was there, said Fred. He said that's just a rumor. That just sounds like something she's trying to say for an excuse to get out. That doesn't even make any sense, Fred. Why would Laura make something up about herself unaliving his mother or doing something awful to cause her death so she could have an excuse to leave the holler? She's a grown woman. She doesn't need an excuse. If she wants to leave, she should just leave. That's my opinion. Of course, things are always easier said than done. Ziggy says they were trying to accuse Laura of doing something to your mom. People are saying Fred's mom gave Laura money to bail Fred out of jail, and she went and got drugs instead. Fred said, no, that's not true. It's just that my mom only gave 75, and it was like 115 to get out. Ziggy said the person acted like they were friends with his sisters. Fred says, where the camper is, up the holler, my mom was supposed to sign that over to me, and she was supposed to put that in my name before she passed. And they screwed me over on all of that. Ziggy says, I think Laura is afraid she's going to get kicked out of there too. Fred says she can get kicked out of there. She can't. She can't get kicked out of there. They got to get court orders and everything, and it would take them over a year to get her out anyways because of the paperwork and everything. Ziggy said she took dog food because she said she didn't have any dog food or anything. Ziggy asks if she has money for food for herself. Fred says Laura's always on that pity thing. I know it's none of my business and has nothing to do with Summer, but I do wonder why, if Fred and Laura don't even seem to want to be together or to even like each other, why are they still together? I know they've been together for a long time, and sometimes things take a while and it can be hard. I get that. But Laura's trying to escape. But why can't she just leave? It makes me wonder. Fred talks about her like he can hardly stand her, so why not just let her go? I know they've been together for a really long time, and it's easier said than done, like I said. But they just don't seem happy together based on what I've heard. Ziggy said she was worried about Laura. Ziggy asks if they'll let him out by the end of August or lower his bond. Fred says they put it at $2,500 and said they would work with him on that already. So probably not. And that's a lot to come up with. Ziggy says you don't really have that bad of a record, so maybe they'll let you do house arrest or something, which they might actually, but I'd say Fred's summer is pretty much shot this year. Fred says we'll see. There's no court or nothing here till August 31st, so I won't see a judge until then. Ziggy said, you haven't seen a judge at all. Fred says no. Ziggy thought you were supposed to be able to see a judge within 24 hours of being taken in, she says. Fred says, no, not evidently. My arraignment is August 31st, which honestly, I thought you were supposed to be able to see a judge within 24 hours as well, but I guess not. Ziggy says, so the people who set you up or whatever happened, you don't think it was anything to do with Summer Wells? Fred says, no. How could that have anything to do with Summer? I'm seriously wondering. Ziggy said, so it probably was a very small amount too, wasn't it? I don't know why she would assume that. There's nothing hinting at that it was only a very small amount of drugs he sold. It probably was not a good idea for Fred to be talking about his case like that with Ziggy on the phone at the jail because he could incriminate himself. Fred says he's not for sure because they didn't really tell him how much it was exactly. He says he hasn't got any paperwork yet. They haven't given him anything. I bet he has a general idea, but I think Fred knows better than to talk about it on the jail phone since he hasn't even seen his paperwork yet. Ziggy said she hasn't seen an article or seen it on the news or anything. Fred says they just come in and they had an arrest warrant for maintaining a dwelling where narcotics were sold, and I'm not seeing any paperwork with anything. Ziggy says, I just seen the 2 dates that the transactions happened on. She says on the court website, they put the 2 dates. Ziggy says it looks like it went to grand jury or something because on June 1st, that's when the grand jury met, and that's when they issued the warrant, I think, or filed something. Fred says, yeah, that's when the indictments come out. Ziggy asked if there was anyone else arrested related to his case. Ziggy said a few other people got arrested around the same time that Fred did, and she was wondering if Fred knew them. Ziggy asks if there's anything she can do to help besides with money. Fred says if someone can work with me on the outside to push that they broke my arm and wrist in here because that could help him get out, allegedly. Ziggy asked how many people attacked him, and he said just one. Fred says he was asleep. Fred says the fan was out in the jail and it was really hot, so they've been putting a sheet around their neck to keep cool. And he said, I was there on the bottom bunk, and he used that to his advantage. Ziggy asked if they had been arguing, and he said, no, he just come in off the streets, and I was just laying on the bottom bunk. Ziggy's like, wow, that's crazy. I was thinking, I hope something doesn't happen to Fred in there. Ziggy said Dawn brought Fred's name up in Summer's case, so she says some people think you're scary, and I just don't see it. She finds it funny. She said Fred isn't scary at all and laughs. Fred says, well, I take some things serious, like getting snitched out. Ziggy says that's different. That's messing with someone's life. Fred says I do my time for my crime. I do. If I get caught up on my own accord, but if someone wants to take it to save their ass and snitch me out for what they've done, it's a different story. Ziggy says, yeah, when they were probably begging you to help them out when they were wearing a wire or whatever. Fred says, I told them what would happen. Ziggy says, we should be careful what we talk about on here because they record these, and I don't want to get you in any kind of trouble, like incriminate you or something. Fred says, oh, I know. Ziggy says, you can't even remember when it was, so yeah, I don't want you to admit it. Right. Fred says it's really hard to really figure it out. Exactly who got you anyways. You can have an idea, but as far as knowing 100%, it's hard to know. So he doesn't know exactly like he said he did. He was just probably trying to make it seem like, oh, yeah, there was only a couple times, so it had to have been him. Ziggy asked, when do you want me to schedule for Saturday? And they talk about when they'll reschedule again. They talk about Fred wanting that cell phone, needing $15 to be able to text out on it for like a month or whatever. And then, Ziggy's his sugar mama, so she's going to look into it for him. And Fred says, I do know that you can use a card. The most that can be put on commissary is $300 with a credit card, but you bring cash and then you can put $1,000 on whatever. But not like that's going to happen. But Ziggy says, well, I have to do it online, obviously, because I'm in Indiana. But there are some locals with, like, Kathy went down there and dropped off cash, which should have shown up immediately. But anyways, you have to pay per minute or something. So I'll see you Saturday. And she says she'll try and get Laura on the phone. And Ziggy said she really wants out of the holler, doesn't she? Fred says, yeah, I think she wants to go back home to Virginia. Ziggy asks Fred if he wants to go back to Virginia, and Fred says, no, I don't want to go back there. Last time I was there, I didn't even leave my property at all and still went to jail for 3.5. Ziggy laughs and says, all right, well, I'm going to let you go, and I will talk Saturday, and I'm glad I got to talk to you. Fred says, all right, take care of yourself. I love you. Ziggy's like really awkwardly like, all right, well, you take care. You're like a brother to me now. Take care. Talk to you soon. And Fred's like, all right, I love you. And then the call ends. So that was pretty interesting, right? Then there's another 15-minute phone call. There's a 15-minute visit where Ziggy tells Fred that Laura got arrested and she got paraphernalia charge and possession charge for meth. Ziggy says Laura should have known they would be watching her and should have been more careful. So the phone's breaking up really bad throughout this whole thing too. And if my son didn't just wake up, I would have read through everything that I typed out word for that one too. So it would be, for anyone that couldn't understand it, I've got it all transcribed here, but I think I'm just going to try and put that in another video and just upload it as a video. But yeah, Ziggy in this one part, she says, oh, I thought you said Summer was off a cliff, and Fred said she is in the water. So Summer is allegedly in a cave under the water off a cliff, according to Fred, which, like I said, I have a really hard time believing. Her Amber Alert is still up, but if it was true, well, shoot, I hope that everybody didn't go there and contaminate the crime scene before the cops could get there. Like I said, I'm very skeptical of all of this, though. That's just my opinion. So yeah, like I said, I'll just upload that as another video because my son woke up and he can be a little wild and crazy, so I should probably get off of here before he starts wanting my computer. And I really appreciate you guys being here. I know this really doesn't really pertain to Summer. It's just about Fred, somebody that lived near Summer, and some things that he's speculating about her. But could it have validity? Could there be substance to it? Could there be more to it if these other people maybe were questioned? And I know Cotton's not around anymore, but I feel like there's more people involved than just him. Maybe it could potentially lead to something. I don't know. I hope so. Obviously, it would be great if it was credible, because then that means Summer could be found, but I just don't think so. That's just my opinion. Okay, well, thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate you guys, and I hope everybody has an awesome day. So my son has a autism evaluation coming up, and it's not for a couple more months yet that he's going to go, but so he goes through phases where it's really hard for me to be able to be on my computer much, but I'm always around and listening, and I'm praying every day that Summer is found safe and that she can tell her own story one day if she wants to, and that she will get her justice. And I truly believe in my heart that she will. And I feel that we're all probably going to be very surprised to know the details of what really happened when it does go to court someday. And I pray that Summer's brothers find peace and happiness in life, and the strength that I know that they have inside them is probably so great that they're going to do amazing things in life. Just wanted to end it on a good note. And I truly hope everybody has a nice day. I love you guys, and I love being here with you guys, and I love being here for Summer and doing this. It's just really hard to find the means and the time to be able to sit down without noise. All right, thanks for being here, guys. Have a nice day.
Away, Appalachian princess, too beautiful to say. Appalachian princess, can't shut me up. I will be here fighting. Can't brush me off with thunder and lightning. She goes, we follow, not scared of no hollow. We want you to stay, Appalachian princess. But you got gone away, Appalachian princess. We'll figure out a way to get you out of this mess. They thought we could hire Appalachian princess, but we're here to find you, Appalachian princess. Can't look away, Appalachian princess. Too beautiful to stay, Appalachian princess.